A world under siege. The Separatists have launched a massive offensive against the planet Ryloth. A blockade of deadly battleships has cut off any support for the dwindling Republic defenses. Though they have fought valiantly with the help of Twi'lek freedom fighter Cham Syndulla, hope is fading for Jedi Master Dai and his men as the droid army closes in.
Came in a little hot on that one. Sorry, Bucketheads. Greetings, Mayvar Jigar. Welcome to the 105th Jar Jar Juggling for Justice episode of Mandovision. Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out this small, independent, yet awesome Star Wars podcast. Remember, of course, the best way to reach out to us via social media at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show at mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Put that at in there. Please make sure you're liking, subscribing, sharing the show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert. If possible or so inclined, and you're into it, sweet 5-star reviews are the best way to support shows like ours and make sure we don't get lost in the shuffle and we defeat the tyranny of the algorithm. How is everyone doing? Welcome back in. How was your weekend? I hope everyone had a great one. Hope you got a lot of things done, or maybe I hope you didn't, and you just got to relax and kick back and watch Star Wars. Because why wouldn't you? If you have free time, why aren't you watching Star Wars? Watching some Clone Wars, maybe. Maybe you got ahead on this weekend, and you're caught up now. You already watched the episode we're about to talk about. Well, that would be fun, wouldn't it? So yeah, that's what we're doing here. We're still at the beginnings of our Star Wars Season 3 of we're still in the beginning of Season 3 of Star Wars, The Clone Wars, and our intensive rewatch of the series as we break it down and provide in-depth, hard-hitting analysis and commentary. Yeah, maybe not that hard-hitting, but hopefully some insights coming out of this. It's fun to go back and rewatch these. I've said it 1,000 times. This episode in particular has a lot going on in it because it sets up not just one episode of the show, but two, and technically more than that because it actually sets up a whole trilogy of episodes. So this is going to be a fun one to revisit as we talk about some stuff. We catch back up with Jar Jar Binks and Bail Organa. This is sort of an episode that highlights some of the undersung heroes of the prequel era, and that's always a nice thing in my opinion because luckily I have lived long enough that I have seen the prequels go from being the villain to being the hero, and that is a really nice thing, a nice turn in the fandom, because for a long time, if you're in my age bracket, you probably remember the prequels took a pretty big beating from critics and even from fans, and to be in a place now where the sort of more I almost said militant. I'm not sure that's the right word, but it's borderline militant faction of the fandom that was just so against the prequels. It's nice to see that the younger generation has embraced this and put them up on a pedestal in a good way. I think because the prequels again they're flawed, but so I could point out to the original trilogy and show some of the flaws in that as well. But we don't do that because we love Star Wars for what it is and not for what it isn't. And that's something I'm trying very hard to remember in the sequel trilogy. But again, I need time on that one. We'll get there. I know I will. I'll soften the hard edges I have about some of the choices that were made in that series. But again, back to this one, I like that the prequels have this new life from a generation of fandom that is now, 20-ish years old, grew up with the episodes 1, 2, and 3, and have embraced them in the way my generation embraced 4, 5, and 6. So it's a lot of fun. It's exciting. So we are here for season 3, episode 3, Supply Lines. The original air date on this was September 24th, 2010. Our plot for the episode. Okay, I gotta try and say this with a straight face. Jedi Master Ima-Gun-Di and his men are trapped on the besieged world of Ryloth. Senator Bail Organa teams up with Representative Jar Jar Binks to convince neutral King Katunku of Todaria to send aid to the Twi'leks of Ryloth. I kind of stumbled through that one a little bit. I apologize, but I think you understand where I was coming at with this one. Our director for this one, once again, Brian O'Connell returns to direct another episode written by Stephen Melching and Ian Mahoney. Our cast is another episode just full of returning top-tier voice acting talent. Phil Lamar as Bail Organa, Orn Frita, TX20, D. Bradley Baker is the Clone Troopers and Toydarian Minister number 2. Brian George is King Katunku and a male Twi'lek. Robin Atkin Downs is Master D. Shamsin Dula, Toydarian Minister number 1. Gideon Emery as Lot Dodd in the Toydarian Guard. Ahmad Best returns as Jar Jar Binks and the Defense Minister. James Arnold Taylor as Obi-Wan and Admiral Dow. I don't remember Obi-Wan in this episode. I think he's just Admiral Dow in this one. Again, Terrence T.C. Carson gets credit as Mace Windu. Oh, no, you know what? I take it back. Obi-Wan and Mace are at the very, very beginning. My apologies. Terrence T.C. Carson as Mace Windu and Justice Minister. Corey Burton is Count Dooku and Gobi Glee. Tom Kane is the narrator and Yoda. Matthew Wood as the battle droids. So yeah, there's our cast. And let's go ahead. We'll just get our Jedi Fortune Cookie out of the way right here. Where there's a will, there's a way. I had never heard that before, so I'm just kidding. A fairly obvious one, but that's okay. That's okay. Not all these have to be deep and impactful and hard hitting, but very on the nose with this episode, with that Jedi Fortune Cookie. And again, this one is an episode that connects a lot of things that we've already seen. We connect some dots back to the first season of Star Wars: The Clone Wars in this episode. Not only is this episode a direct prequel to the Ryloth trilogy that's towards the tail end of Season 1 of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, it actually sets up the events that we will see in the very first episode of Star Wars: The Clone Wars in Season 1, the Ambush episode, the episode that focuses on Master Yoda and his under siege team of clone troopers as Asajj Ventress and the droid army closes in on them to prevent a meeting with King Katunku from Toydaria as Yoda attempts to negotiate for a supply base on Toydaria. So we're kind of catching up with some familiar stuff that we go all the way back to Season 1 for. And if memory serves, I didn't remember any of that when these episodes first aired. And I was like, I feel this feels familiar, but I didn't have like the wherewithal to connect the dots all the way back to Season 1. But now, obviously, as we do this rewatch, it's like, oh yeah, duh, it's right there on Front Street, and I just missed it the first time around. But here we go. Here we are, and we're going to get into it right now. Let's go ahead, before we get into any more of our analysis, any more of our commentary, let's talk about, well, we can't talk about it. There's something to do first. Good grief. Tom, you have to get your head on straight. You have to get your bucket on straight. And that's what it's time for. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Master Jedi, we're running out of food and water, and our heavy weapon systems are out of power.
I'll contact our forces in orbit. Admiral Dow, this is General Dai. You're in trouble down here. We need those supplies immediately.
So there we hear the voice of Jedi Master Ima-Gun-Di. Or, I'm gon' die. Because that's what he'd do in this episode. Spoilers on that. One of the rare times that Star Wars is just so on the nose with the name of a character. And a character that sort of has like an interesting I like the look of him. I mean, we've never really seen a Nikto Jedi before, at least not in my recollection. Maybe in some of the old expanded universe comic books or something like that, we've come across some Nikto Jedi. Actually, now that I think about it, I think we have. But still, in the context of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, this is a nice bit of breath of fresh air as far as our alien species to be Jedi Knights. Of course, the Nikto from Kintan. I'm Jedi Master. I'm a Gundi. He was an originally part of the Helios clan in some supplemental materials that came out after these episodes. I think there's even, I think it's the book by Cavan Scott that sort of shows this stuff, the one with Dooku. We meet Helios clan, which is led by Master Terra Sanube, who we have met in previous episodes of this show as well, and who's also given an extensive backstory with the help of writers like Cavan Scott. So, a character who posthumously got a great backstory behind him, has a connection to Qui-Gon Jinn and some other Jedis that we've met through this show. And yeah, I mean, we meet a character who, again, if we make the connections that this episode is in fact a prequel to the Ryloth trilogy episodes, we sort of know his fate going in. And I feel like that's why they don't really care that his name is I'm Gundi. And when you look at like when you see it written down on a piece of paper, you're like, okay, I know what fate awaits this particular Jedi Master. But the episode does so much more to service that storyline from season 1 on Ryloth. When we meet Sham Syndulla and we start to, and we're like, why does he not trust the Republic? What has happened in the lead up to this occupation by the Separatist forces that caused him to have this mistrust? And I think at the time we just kind of write it off as like, well, they let the Ryloths down. They let this invasion happen. No, it's a little bit more complicated than that. That's what we see in this episode. The Republic forces tried to save Ryloth, to protect Ryloth. But the Separatists were bound and determined to occupy the planet and to subjugate these people. And we see that a valiant effort was made by Master D and his clone forces before that was allowed to happen. And he does his best to help the people, despite the fact that it seems like the battle may be lost, but Master D is going to try and help these people as best he can by calling for relief efforts, getting food and medical supplies through this blockade that the Separatists have enacted in their initial wave of occupation on the planet. And it is sort of interesting. It's one of the rare times thus far in the series where we've seen sort of like the battle is lost, but we must protect the people at all costs, knowing that the end is probably nigh for our Republic forces, for our Jedi Masters and clone troopers, and yeah, it's a solid enough episode. I think I was read some of the reviews on it, and people just thought it was kind of ho hum, and I would generally think I generally tend to believe that is because of the politics involved in the episode and the Jar Jar Binksness of the episode. And so I think some people are still kind of scorned about Jar Jar, and that we've talked about it in other episodes that Jar Jar shows up in. I think episodes, as far as their ratings go, they lose almost like a full point basically because of the Jar Jar-ness of episodes. And I actually really like Jar Jar in this episode. He's been fine in the previous ones, but I really like him in this. I think he does a really nice job, and it's great to have Ahmad Best come back and resume the role. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. The episode opens with a fierce battle against the Separatists as they attempt to occupy the planet. And again, we meet Sham Syndulla as he's leading the resistance. A call is made to the Jedi Council, headed up by Mace Windu and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And they then contact Bail Organa, who is in the Tantive 4 doing all kinds of diplomatic negotiations, because that's what politicians do, at least in Star Wars. They ask him to go to Toydaria and to make contact, to make a deal, to negotiate a treaty so that they can use Toydaria as a launching point for relief efforts to Ryloth. Let's go ahead and check in with Count Dooku, as the Separatist forces have overheard this conversation as well.
Sir, we intercepted a coded transmission between Senator Organa and the Jedi Council. We were able to partially unscramble it. The Jedi have sent Senator Organa to Toydaria to negotiate a treaty which would allow them to send relief supplies to their forces on Ryloth.
Send a message to Senator Lot Dodd of the Trade Federation. I wish to speak with him immediately.
As we mentioned, we meet up with Bail Organa while he's on the Tantive 4. Another nice callback to things we know from the original trilogy. And again, if we catch up with the Tantive in episode 3, so it all makes sense that Organa's on this ship. So but it's just nice to see it, seeing that blockade runner as we know it. It's so indelibly etched in our memories. So it is fun to see that ship, and I don't know. I've always been a real fan of that ship and its design, and I thought they put it to really good use in Rogue One. I really liked the way they deployed it, how it was like within the ship and they launched. I really like that whole sequence. I think everyone on this who listens to this podcast knows how much I adore Rogue One as a movie. So yeah, no shock there, no surprise there. But and again, a nice little touch, as they do so often on Star Wars: The Clone Wars. And if memory serves as well with this episode, this is our first canonical visit to Toydaria, the planet of the junk dealer Watto that we got to know so well. In a Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace. Woo, a little verklempt right there. My goodness. So we're getting to see the world for the first time. We don't see a ton of it. We see sort of like the Imperial Palace area, but we see it's a very verdant green planet. A lot going on there. And as we learned through the episode, the Toydarians, and we'll talk more about this a little bit later, but the Toydarians on the world, on the home planet, very different than Watto. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that as we sort of get further into the episode. But that's sort of hinted at when we first meet King Katunku back in Ambush. But to see so many other Toydarians who are basically the polar opposite of Watto is very, very interesting. So again, we'll talk more about that as we work our way there. Organa meets up with Jar Jar Binks, Representative Binks, and they're going to go meet King Katunku, who reiterates that Toydaria is a neutral system and that they don't want to get involved in conflict. They want to help the Ryloth. They want to help the Twi'leks. But it's complicated because they do not want to be seen to be showing favors to the Republic over the Separatists because they have trade agreements with the Trade Federation and things like that. So they have to stay neutral to get the whatever deals they have worked out with the Trade Federation. So whatever is being imported to Toydaria or being exported from Toydaria continues to move along to support their economy is my assumption that I make there. But obviously, and again, as we get into this more and more with the Toydarians, we see that they are a noble species, a compassionate species, and this is very much not the impression we have of them from Watto. So, sort of like this, I feel like they sort of, I don't want to say they went out of their way, but I like that Watto is sort of the outlier of what a Toydarian actually is at their core. That they are sort of this noble, compassionate species, and Watto is just like, that's why he's probably not on the homeworld. He's like, hey, you know what, I gotta get out of here because I gotta make some moolah and go play some dice games with some huts, and I really like that part of it, and it's again just a really nice touch to have the Toydarians kind of be like this high moral ground species. I did really, really dig that. Of course, Lot Dodd of the Trade Federation shows up to interfere with all this. Like, hey, you can't help them. They're actually supporting the Republic military on this. This isn't about running supplies. This is about, this isn't about providing aid. It's about supporting their military efforts. So there's a whole political back and forth here. Again, politics suck. We all know that. I think we all are on Team Obi-Wan with that with our thoughts on politics and politicians. They're only as good as far as you can throw them. Though maybe Obi-Wan can check a politician pretty far. I'm not quite sure. He's got the Force on his side after all. We go back to Ryloth for more of the battles. We find out the Republic forces and the Twi'leks are pinned down. They're in a very vulnerable position, being able to be attacked on two fronts. They're trapped in like this valley. And it's going to be up to Master D to come up with a plan to get the Twi'leks out of there. And I think it's at this point that he's beginning to realize that it's all about saving the people at this point. The battle may be lost for him and the Republic, but the people have to get out. They have to give them a chance to rally and to fight for their homeworld another day. That sort of seems to be the feel I get from D, that he knows the end is nigh for him. I mean, it is in his name after all. But again, just kind of fun. I want to talk about real quickly. I have to mention this, and I know we've seen Lot Dodd before, and I can't remember if in prior episodes if his headgear is a little bit different. But in this episode in particular, and again, maybe it was in the other episodes, but it jumped out at me more so in this one than in others. His hat is bananas. Like that thing is like, I don't even know how that thing stays on his head. It's huge. It's like a Pope hat times 12. It is an impressive piece of headwear engineering. Woof, I don't know how the thing stays aloft. I do not know. He might have a droid in there, like a secret droid with guns, in case he ever comes under fire. That's the only thing. Like, it almost looks like he's hiding something in that hat. He's got to be smuggling something onto Toydaria with the hat that size. It's comically big, in my opinion. So I'm gonna have to go back and try to find some other episodes with Ladad in him and see if he has that hat. I suspect he does, because they keep these character models fairly consistent, unless it's time to put like a noticeable change into them. So I have to go back and have to see if this hat is in other episodes, because it is bananas. And I just had to mention that. Back on Ryloth, Master D comes up with a plan for the Twi'leks to escape. It involves taking the Lone Republic transport / gunship and turning it into a bomb and blowing up one of the Canaan access points so that it forces the separatist forces. It forces the separatist force. That is not a good sentence, but it compels the separatist forces to go through the only way into that valley, and it'll buy the Ryloth people, the Twi'leks, time to make their escape, to run for it, while the clones and Master D hold off the separatist forces. It's a bold plan, but again, this is like them knowing their end game, and knowing that the sacrifice that has to be made to save these people. I think Master D thinks they can pull it off, but at the same time, I think he's also well aware that his end is possibly in front of his face. I think he's hopeful, but he's also realistic at the same time. We go back to Toydaria, and King Tutunku denies aid to Ryloth because neutrality must be preserved. It keeps his people out of the war. It keeps them from being drawn into the conflict, potentially coming under separatist attack, having to rely on Republic forces. But Tutunku is again, this is a more noble Toydarian than what we have seen in Watto. So as Binks and Organa are making their way out and feeling like they may have lost the day and trying to figure out what to do next, the king approaches them privately and says, "We will, you brought supplies. We will help you get those supplies to the people." And it's not all that Organa wanted, but it's a start. So they have to make this happen now, but they have to figure out a way to distract Latdod so that they can pull this off without appearing to break the neutrality, because that is King Tutunku's primary stipulation, is that the supplies cannot be traced back to the Toydarians. It cannot be traced back to Toydaria as the launch point for these things. So it's a tightrope they have to walk to pull this off, but they're going to do it at a dignitary dinner kind of event. All the fancy Toydarians, Latdod and his aide, and it's supposed to be supposedly Organa and Binks, though Organa excuses himself really quickly, and Jar Jar Binks will become the primary distraction that will be needed to make sure that Latdod doesn't notice all the Republic cruisers that are not cruisers, the blockade runners that are taking off from Toydaria full of supplies for Ryloth, and it comes about with Jar Jar. Do I want to talk about that right now? No, I want to come back to another sequence. Let's go ahead and play a clip. Hang on. All right, let's set the scene up a bit, provide a little context. We're back on Ryloth. The bomb is ready. Just before this, though, this is when we sort of get to see the beginning of Sham Syndulla's distrust of the Republic forming, and why he's not enthused when they show up during the Ryloth trilogy in Season 1, why he doubts their sincerity and their efforts, because he feels abandoned by them at this point. Supplies have not come. Relief forces, backup forces to prevent this occupation have not arrived, and he feels extremely betrayed by this. So we begin to foreshadow that with this sequence. But now we're going to cut to the bomb working as Master D makes his plans to aid the people in their escape from the battle. Let's go ahead and check it out. I found this clip amusing.
There is a gunship blocking our way. OM5, OM7, go check it out. Roger, roger. Careful. It might be full of clones. No clones. Just explosives. Explosives!
Gotcha. All right, there you go. The bomb works. They're going to collapse the entryway into that canyon system. And then we go back to Todaria. We see the clones offloading the supplies and loading up the blockade runners. And this is when Jar Jar has to provide his distraction. And it's a very appropriate Jar Jar level distraction. And what I mean by that is, again, people view Jar Jar as a clown, as a silly character. But what he does here is, in sort of a clownish way, he kind of like leans into that sort of characterization of him, that belittling characterization of him, and he performs a juggling act, and a fairly masterful one too, in an effort to distract Lot Dodd from witnessing the blockade runners taking off from Toydaria full of supplies. And I really liked it. I think it was fun. I don't know. Again, if you just have a beef against Jar Jar, you're not going to like it. And that's just all there is to it. But it shows that Jar Jar has some skills, and Jar Jar can do some things. He's not just this buffoon who just roams around causing chaos and anarchy wherever he goes. He's actually capable of doing interesting things, not just enabling Supreme Chancellor Palpatine to have, unlimited powers of the Senate. No. It's far more than that. Jar Jar is far more than that. I was not really happy with the sort of, I'll just say, the sort of like disgraceful way that Jar Jar was treated in Chuck Wendig's Aftermath trilogy. It was just like one little chapter about a sad, broken Gungan. It really kind of bummed me out. And I think the character deserves better than that, but it just seemed like Wendig was leaning into the sort of anti-Jar Jar sentiments that's so high, even to this day. It's just a real bummer. So I like this scene. I think he juggles like a boss in this, and it works, distracts. And then we get Master D's final charge, and it's pretty awesome. Let's go ahead and cue up his moments as the overwhelming Separatist forces move in against him, and just at the end, as things appear to be the most grim, some news is delivered to let him know that his sacrifice is not in vain.
Captain Kiri!
I'm not finished yet, sir. We can do this, General.
Well, let's make the end memorable!
This is Republic Blockade Runner 099er. We have broken through.
The Twi'leks will live to fight another day.
The supplies have arrived at the drop point.
But Master D does not live to see that moment. But the Twi'leks do, and they get their supplies, their medical relief, and it's an exciting day to know that his sacrifice is worth it. The people will move on. They will continue to resist the occupation. And that's all he's trying to do, is buy them another day, another battle for down the road. And by that extension, he's very successful. We go back to Toydaria, and we get some big, exciting stuff. Lot Dodd knows he's been conned, but it is too little too late as far as that goes. But he wants to let Bail Organa know that he knows something is afoot here. And we're going to go ahead and play that clip too. Check it out.
You play a dangerous game, Organa. Next time, you will not get away with this.
The Republic has heart, my friend. But I am not convinced it has the strength to prevail. However, after what I witnessed here today, perhaps it is time I reconsidered our neutrality. Tell the Jedi I am open to meeting with them.
Master Yoda will be glad to hear it.
For now, at least, the people of Ryloth shall endure.
Boom. There you go. There you have it. That's the end of the episode. And again, we're setting the stage up. This episode acted as a prequel to that Ryloth trilogy in Season 1. And now we set up the events that we are depicted in the very first episode of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, in the ambush episode, where Master Yoda goes to meet with King Katunku and begin to negotiate for a forward base to launch operations from it, and relief supplies, it sounds like. Good stuff. I like how it all ties together. And again, this is part of that sliding, non-linear storytelling that they've been doing so well in this series. We jump back and forth in the timeline in the war, but we very often connect back with things that are familiar and that we've been to before. So it's sort of interesting. It's a very interesting way to tell the stories. You get this big chunk, like I said, you get that Ryloth trilogy, and you think you know the story, but no. Look, there's a little bit more to it at the beginning. And again, it sets the stage for something else too that dovetails back into the very first episode of the show. So I really dig this episode. I think it's rock solid, entertaining. 7.5. The politics don't bother me. Again, that's part of this era of Star Wars, is the politician aspect of it. That sets the stage for Princess Leia too, who was a senator before she was a rebel general. So really cool stuff. A lot of fun here, and I hope you all had as much fun with this episode as I did. So that's it. That's this week's episode. We're here on Monday. We're kicking off the week. We're going to be back on Friday. Maybe something cool happens in between and we come back early. Who knows? Disney Day, or is it Disney Plus Day, is just around the corner. I actually think that's next Friday. So there may be even a bonus show on Friday. Stay tuned for 2 episodes next Friday. You'll have one in the morning when you wake up. It'll be right there in your feed. And depending on what announcements happen on Disney Plus Day, there might be something else to come back to in the afternoon. So maybe 2 shows on Friday. We'll see how it all goes. In the meantime, I hope everyone has a great week. If you're working right now, if you have work all week long, I hope it goes smooth and easy. And we'll be here to kick off your weekend for you on Friday. That's it. Take care of each other. Remember, the best way to follow us is on social media, at Mando_Vision. Instagram, Twitter, the whole shebang. Long-form emails can be sent to mandovisiontom@gmail.com. And make sure, please, do me a favor, like, subscribe, share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert, even as I am forced to relocate my covert to a different part of town. More about that later. We'll talk more about that as I get more and more stressed out about it. In the meantime, we're going to get out of here. I got to pack some boxes. You know this podcast only ends one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
Bounty hunting is a complicated profession.